like sunshine, like springtime, like something's in the water and I'm taking a deep dive. I'm feeling so weightless, like I'm gonna make it, and nothing in the universe can take this. I can see it clearly now, nothing gonna bring me down. I got my head held high, I'm on my way, and I'm following the signs to my happy place. I'm walking in the light of a brand new day, and I'm right where I belong, in my happy place. I got my head held high, I'm on my way, and I'm following the signs to my happy place. I'm walking in the light of a brand new day, and I'm right where I belong, in my happy place. And I'm right where I belong, in my happy place. And I'm right where I belong, in my happy place.
Hi, welcome to the National University of Singapore Yonglou Lin School of Medicine's Healthy Longevity webinar. We're back from a short break, and actually I'm in Copenhagen right now along with Andrea, who's at the meeting paying attention to the talks while I do this webinar, and several of our lab members for the Aging Research and Drug Development meeting. And it's amazing to come to this meeting every year. It just shows you how much the aging research field is growing. We have over 500 attendees, the room's packed, there's thousands of people online, and so it's just more evidence that longevity research is coming to the forefront. So tonight we have a great talk by Enej Kuscer, and we'll get back to him in a few minutes. I want to remind you that to use the Q&A function to ask questions, and we'll try to get to those during our discussion. Before we get to Enej, though, I want to bring in Camille Pabas, a PhD student in the Center for Healthy Longevity, and he'll be talking about distinct and additive effects of calorie restriction and rapamycin and aging skeletal muscle.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Camille, and I'm a PhD student in the Brian Kennedy lab. I will present a paper where the authors combine caloric restriction and rapamycin to see how this affects aging skeletal muscle of mice. Rapamycin is an interesting drug, so it extends lifespan in dozens of different mouse models and has many health benefits, including slowed muscle aging. However, unfortunately, it worsens glucose tolerance as well. It is an indirect inhibitor of the mammalian target of rapamycin pathway. In this pathway, it hits both the mTORC1 and the mTORC2 complex. And broadly speaking, what mTOR does is it's a multi-purpose nutrient sensor, and normally it's activated by calories and amino acids. So you can see there's already a connection with caloric restriction there. Caloric restriction itself also extends lifespan in dozens of different mouse models and has many health benefits, among those slowed muscle aging. However, in contrast to rapamycin, it does improve glucose tolerance in mouse models. And it activates many pathways. Among those is reduced growth hormone signaling and many others. And chief among those is reduced mTOR signaling. So does this mean that rapamycin is a caloric restriction mimetic? Well, just because it's plausible doesn't mean it's true in practice. We still have to test to what extent these treatments are additive. And we're also interested in the future to know what happens if you combine other treatments with rapamycin or caloric restriction. People, for example, tested rapamycin and metformin, finding that the combination is slightly more beneficial than an individual treatment. In contrast, when you give rapamycin to growth hormone receptor knockout mice, this is not beneficial, probably because the mTOR pathway is already maximally suppressed in these mice. Also, a very recent study showed that combining rapamycin with two different interventions was very beneficial for the health span of aging mice. So that's why the authors wanted to test the combination. They started by looking at the individual interventions. They did RNA-seq on 4 different mouse tissues, mouse muscle tissues, and then they did pathway analysis looking for overlap between caloric restriction and rapamycin. What they found was that when there was overlap, the two treatments often activated pathways in different directions. However, eventually they did find a cluster of genes that behaved similarly between the two. And these were largely genes involved in inflammation and immunity. So this might be a common target between the two pathways. Next, the authors wanted to test whether caloric restriction can protect mouse muscle from chronic mTORC1 activation. For this, they use a muscle-specific TSC1 knockout mouse, which has persistent mTOR activation, and that leads to muscle wasting, which they call sarcopenia in this case. And as you can see on the right, if you impose caloric restriction in these mice, this is beneficial, and performance in the hang test and the rotor-road test is improved. And what is important is that these benefits happen without inhibiting mTOR signaling. So here shown in the orange arrows, you can see that in the TSC knockout model, phosphorylation of S6 is not affected under caloric restriction. And this is a common marker of mTOR signaling. So arguing that caloric restriction acts independently of the mTOR pathway here. Then finally, the authors wanted to combine caloric restriction and rapamycin during mouse aging. They started at 19 months of age and continued for roughly 10 months with this treatment. And they go on to show that the combined treatment is more beneficial than each individual treatment for grip strength during aging. And they also show that the treatment affects mouse activity, especially during the night period. However, interestingly, when you combine the two treatments or even give them individually, they did not see many changes in blood glucose levels in these animals. So after this, the authors asked what could be the mechanism behind the protective effects of the treatments and the combination. For this, they stained muscle sections for slow and fast twitch fibers. The slow twitch fibers are stained in orange here. And to the right, you can see that the treatments increase the number of fast twitch muscle fibers, which could be beneficial because these are quite resistant to atrophy during aging. So in summary, they found different transcriptomic changes between caloric restriction and rapamycin and showed that the two treatments are additive and beneficial during muscle aging in mice. And hopefully we will get more studies of combinations in the future like that. Thank you for your attention.
So thanks, Camille. He's actually here in Copenhagen as well, and he'll be giving a talk at the meeting tomorrow. So we're excited to hear that. It's great to have Enej on the show tonight. He's a biotech entrepreneur, co-founder and CEO of several biotech companies, including AC's Comet Therapeutics and Longevize. And his work crosses a spectrum of different types of research, from synthetic biology to microbial engineering through drug discovery with small molecules for rare diseases and systems biology. So I think you've got just about everything covered there. And the topic of his talk today is staying younger for longer, which is something I think we all want to do. So we're excited to hear what you have to say, Enej.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be invited to this webinar, and happy to share with you some of our thoughts and work in the area of longevity. So let me try to share my screen. Okay, so yeah, younger for longer. And indeed, we are, I believe, on the verge of a true longevity revolution relatively around the corner. But before I go into what's going to happen and what we're working on, I would maybe set the stage of why we actually age, and do we really is there really something we can do about it? And this is a topic that has been thoroughly discussed on this webinar series and on many lectures and research activities around the world. But I would still like to kind of paint a whole picture with a kind of maybe a step back view on the whole field. So if we think like animals, their lifespan ranges from days to hundreds of years. And, again, lots of research in nematodes and fruit flies and all kinds of things, what's happening. The initial aging research started in yeasts even. And, what we learned from all of that is that the cells and the organisms have this innate ability to repair and recycle. And we discussed a little bit about that, how basically a mind-boggling chunk of our genome and our whole system is actually dedicated solely to repair of the genome, repair of the proteins, organelles, even of the entire cells get entirely recycled through apoptosis of autophagy and so on. Yeah? Our immune system is not just to fight, pathogens, the bacteria and the viruses, but a big part of our immune system is actually dedicated to internal cleanup and repair. So we are, in a way, made to repair and recycle. And if you look at it, our reproductive cells, they're immortal. They are passing on for millions and millions of years. So from that perspective, the way we look at aging, and again, there's hundreds of different definitions of what aging is. But what we believe aging is a progressive decline in this innate ability to repair. Yeah? And as we start losing the ability to repair, then a whole bunch of a whole range of problems start to appear. And about a decade ago, there was a few really landmark papers that brought together this complex story of cellular aging and metabolism and so on, naming it hallmarks of aging or pillars of aging and so on, that really kind of nicely showed kind of the key principles of what's happening. And these are largely universal. However, what's very important to know is that they are progressing very variably, and not just between species, but within species. We age very differently as human individuals. Some will catch, dementia, some will be, having cancer, some will be having cardiovascular problems and so on. And even the speed is different. So the principles are universal, but they are executed in a very, very varied way. And that gets us to a topic of chronological age versus biological age. And we're starting to really appreciate that these are not the same thing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the discussion. But what's truly fascinating, and the science is starting to really show that more and more, is that a lot of these repair mechanisms, which, let's say, we thought that they are starting to die out and wind down, they can be induced again. They can be restarted again. A lot of the defunct cells, like senescent cells or other damaged tissues and so on, can be recycled and regenerated. To be honest, it doesn't take just drug discovery to do that. It's actually with very simple interventions that are small hacks of life, we can actually significantly impact and extend our health span and counter the hallmarks of aging. So, and we'll talk about that. But the truly exciting thing is that, we do see, something that we used to think is a science fiction, from some crazy novel, is slowly becoming a scientific fact, a reality, that a true rejuvenation is actually around the corner. And we'll talk about that also during the discussion. So the premise of this discussion is we are designed actually in a way, we have this inner ability to regenerate, and there are ways to wake that up and actually make us younger again. Our big problem with the state of affairs at the moment is that, currently we still live in a world where there's the kind of the generic one-size-fits-all approach to health, to wellness, and so on. So something that, a diet works, it must work for everybody. It's not true. Our industry, in reality, it's a sick care industry. So we wait for people to get ill first, then we react with something that hopefully addresses that pathology, rather than trying to focus on the prevention of keeping people healthy. And even on that note, when we do therapies, very often we are pathology focused. Yeah, so we look at the end outcome, not and then very often we're missing out or not even addressing the root cause of the problem. And another thing that is also a big issue with today's industry is that, we are making health decisions on very limited data. Sometimes a simple blood test, and then we make a conclusion and we give people statins. It doesn't take an integrated systemic approach. It doesn't look at, the whole picture of the human. Yeah? And then we'll talk about that. And of course, it is a big problem that on the other hand, we also live in a world that is saturated with, kind of information overwhelming world of Google searches and social media and so on, which can be misleading or even dangerous. Yeah. And I'm not saying that a lot of that advice is not absolutely well intended, but again, we are very, very, very different biological units, human beings. And not everyone will respond in the same way to another person's problem. So we really need to be very mindful of this. But I think the bottom line is, the current society largely, but this is changing, still sees this progressive loss of function and this premature loss of quality life as just something inevitable, as a part of aging. It is what it is. No, I mean, there's a lot we can do about that. So anyway, we believe we are entering a new era of personalized, proactive, and preventive healthcare. And Longevize is doing its best to try to develop truly kind of a unifying platform to address that. And I'll try to share some of our work that we've been developing. So basically, the first key thing is that we really need to look into people's biology from a very systemic perspective. So a 360-degree holistic deep dive analysis of biology, psychology, environment, and a whole bunch of other things. Again, I have another slide on that topic. And also continuous monitoring, through real-time data, through retesting, through wearables, and so on. And then integrating all of that with some pretty complex algorithms to, in a way, create your digital twin, where we can help to discover some really deep insights into people's individual biology. What are the key health drivers, both in a positive as well as in a let's say negative way. And again, a lot of these are evolutionary components. So we can talk a little bit about that. That not I would say. There's the gene that we call FTO, the fat gene. It's actually a gene that was phenomenal in certain time of the evolution of the human species, right? So it was a positive health driver at the time. So anyway, bringing that into a simple to understand, interactive and engaging app, we try to kind of give people this knowledge, the tools and the power to start optimizing, this, physical, cellular, mental health and so on, and really starting to use their full biological potential. And we do believe that it really requires a holistic approach, and not just a holistic, but personalized approach to longevity lifestyle, to exercise, nutrition, supplementation, and so on. Again, we are very different biologies. And the idea is to really reestablish, optimal cell metabolism, optimal cell function, and kind of push back these, hallmarks of aging. So, that's the bottom line. So, welcome to the new you in a way. We aim to optimize the only vehicle in life that truly matters, and that's ourselves, our body. So very briefly on chronological and biological age. Again, this has been discussed thoroughly, but I think it's still worthwhile to touch this. What does that actually mean? So chronological, laws of physics, birthdays. It doesn't have much relevance on how we feel. The biological age is actually the true age of our body, our health, our physical and mental state, and so on. And if we think about it, our biological age, we are born, we grow up, we are fit, we're well, and so on until a certain time, and then slowly, decline starts to happen, and chronic, illnesses kick in. We're getting cancer, we're getting dementia, and so on. That's the kind of the end of our health span. It starts really deteriorating after that. And then at some point, the journey ends, and that's the end of our lifespan. And so for some people, this is really premature. I mean, in their 30s, they can be morbidly obese, full of inflammation and so on. In their 50s and 60s, dying of heart attacks, strokes, and so on. Yeah? Normal aging, you would say, okay, we can live into, well, without any serious problems into our 70s. And then, slowly things start getting worse, and, we can maybe reach our 80s, 90s, and so on. I was actually shocked. Today, CDC announced that for the first time in, I don't know, more or less in history, the life expectancy of children born today went for the US from 76 back to 71. So that's mind-boggling, because the science and technology is starting to enable us to really live well and longer and healthier and so on. And yet the society is filling itself with stress and bad food and chronic conditions and so on. So anyway, that's a whole separate topic to have, but that was a news announcement today that I saw, and it just shocked me. But anyway, to continue on this journey, healthy aging. Well, partly genetics, partly epigenetics, hugely by environment, and most importantly by lifestyle, and to some degree microbiome. People can live still without any decline into their solid 90s, even centenarians. The curve should actually be different, because for healthy aging, probably the health span is almost as much as lifespan. So the decline at the end is actually very rapid. which is truly where eventually one wants to lead with health span oriented strategies. But where we really are getting excited is the lifespan. I mean, is the longevity aging. So this one does require certain types of interactions that we'll talk about later. But the idea here is, again, not entirely just on lifespan, but it's truly keeping healthy, young for a significantly longer period of time. And we do believe that while we do that, we can also significantly impact the lifespan itself. So again, coming back to those, hallmarks of aging or the pillars of aging, and we can talk whether these are 10 or 20 or how many we want to say, right? These are nice ways to describe the story, but in reality, the story is significantly more complex. And most people here on this webinar are aware of, let's say this chart that was, I think, drawn up by the Roche guys initially, but it talks about the central cell metabolism. This is just a part of the cell metabolism. So the whole reality is even significantly more complex. But the bottom line is, for the common language and for unifying kind of where we need to go, hallmarks of aging or pillars of aging is fine. The problem is, the key is the balance. So, like I said before, these are universal, but they progress very variably within the species, within within people, and so on. And once one of these kind of really goes awry, it starts having a very deleterious downstream effects. But also our therapies, if our therapies are targeting just one of these aspects, again, it's not going to truly reset the situation back to full functional, let's say, useful state. So it really is about trying to understand what went wrong, how to rebalance that, and how to bring that to a functional state of cell metabolism. And so going back to that, 360 analysis, what we're trying to do here is really create a high resolution digital twin to really understand, who you truly are. And that, that includes, genome, epigenome, microbiome, blood, and so on, from also, understanding the lifestyle, environment, psychology, physiology, wearables, etc. So as much data as we can gather to kind of, really, integrate all of that together and start, putting the picture together. So while, genome, yes, it's important. I mean, it's a book of life with, 3 million letters and 20,000 recipes, which are, the genes, which are, basically largely controlled by a whole bunch of transcription factors and the epigenome and so on. But these are just, in a way, this is just your potential. This is what the cell can cook. But you take identical twins, they take different life journeys. One is a couch potato, the other one is, an athlete or a very, health conscious person. When they meet at the age of 60, they will have very different biologies. So, lifestyle, the environment, psychology and so on, stress, etc. These are very important things that impact you. But we also must not, forget the microbiome. So, while we have about, this again varies between different assessments, but 10 trillion human cells, each one having exactly the same copy of 20,000 genes, which is quite boring in a way. In addition, we have nearly 100 trillion microbes within us that contributes nearly 40 million additional genes that contribute to diversity of our genetic pool. So really, just doing a blood test by a clinician is not, enough to really understand what's going on within a body. And that, of course, leads down towards, understanding of what, how we can start fine-tuning and optimizing that body. So our idea is we try to really go from this kind of stratification towards, nearly 100% personalization, supported with this, personalized recommendation engine that we've been building to truly know, what's your, optimal nutrition, what's your optimal, kind of exercise regime. We also know that exercise can be very different for different people in terms of how regenerative it is, and so on. So again, really bring your attention to the fact that personalization really is the key to understanding, human health and disease at the same time. So the process in a way is, you analyze, you get to know yourself, and then basically using these insights and recommendations, understanding the drivers, the age clocks, and so on, you're starting to really kind of optimize and change yourself, starting to kind of optimize the personalized diet, personalized lifestyle, all these small longevity hacks and so on, and then tracking your progress. And here we really, again, what's very important is, one needs to look at a complexity of things. So looking into GWAS studies, looking into randomized controlled clinical trials, looking at cross-functional analysis of all kinds of polygenic risk scores, and so on, tens of thousands of papers. So again, we can't, one paper on mice or one paper on some cell line in a very artificial condition show that something works. I don't know. The science has burned their fingers too many times. So again, we really need to be careful about trying to make too many presumptions too quickly, but overall trying to kind of balance the complexity of what we know and what we don't know. Maybe on a slide back, what's also kind of very interesting to us to explore is the age clocks. Yeah. So again, there's been so many age clocks popping up lately. Some are blood age clocks, epigenome age clocks, microbiome age clocks, and so on. We're even exploring kind of metabolome and so on. There's glycans, telomeres, etc. So each one is valuable. Each one tells us a part of the story. So, but not a single one is the one and only. So we really need to understand kind of holistically what's happening on what kind of trajectory of aging you are finding yourself in. So the way we look at the kind of the future of this field, the kind of, what I hinted at the beginning of the talk as the longevity revolution, we see this as a three-stage journey. So the first stage I've already talked about it's the, know yourself part and really, really know yourself. Second part is, change yourself. It's starting to really optimize, by knowing what are your drivers, where you are, what's happened to you, how you can tweak your genetic potential, how you can evolve long-term, kind of chronic conditions, etc. Yeah. So to start optimizing this part to really start living the kind of healthy longevity lifestyle. And the purpose of this is, the know yourself is, don't shorten your life with ignorance. Don't live in the dark and saying, well, I don't care and I eat what I eat and so on. I feel good. And then all of a sudden you die of a heart attack. Yeah. So the idea is to start really optimizing and improving the life, the health span that you have. At the end of the day, people who improve the health span tend to live much nicer and happier because they're full of energy. Yeah, they don't come back home with brain fog and fatigue and all, full of inflammation and so on. So it's beautiful. Yeah, throw away that donut. I mean, so anyway, the third stage is stay young. Yeah, and that's where we believe really the revolution is coming. But again, what I said earlier. It used to be science fiction. It's becoming science fact. So a lot of these things are, not just in the lab, they're in the clinics. Some are already, early stage, maybe some rare niche disease areas, etc. But these are things that seem to be mind-boggling just 2 decades ago. Yeah. So our idea is, you need to get this one vehicle in shape so that you can benefit from all the future technologies that are, basically coming within the next decades. So high level, again, stage 1 or 2, we all like to look and feel younger, but the main thing is, work on your health span, work on your biological age clock, the hallmarks of aging. So get this vehicle in shape, to catch the train of exponential technologies. How do we do that? We're running out of time, so we can return back to this topic later down. But it's really, again, it's very much in terms of personalization of nutrition, supplementation, optimizing the cell metabolism, microbiome. Of course, there are generic stuff as well. We need to eliminate, various kind of environmental and mental stress. However, when we talk about the stress, we should cherish the hormetic stress. We should cherish, fasting, cold shock, exercises, etc. We should get comfortable with being uncomfortable. But the being uncomfortable, again, leads to dopamine, serotonin, and so on. We end up being significantly more happy and full of life after we do these things. They may seem hard at the start, but they completely, kind of reignite your energy and brain activity and so on. Yeah. So physical health, lean body mass, muscles, bones, stamina, flexibility, and so on. Hydrate, breathe. A lot of people don't know how to breathe at all. Eat clean. Sleeping is very important. It has been shown so much, lately. How crucial that is that we don't do those overnighters. So why is that so important? Other than feeling good, it's about preventing frailty, sarcopenia, osteoporosis. We need muscles. Muscles keep us fit. They prevent us getting frail. They prevent us getting the decline. They reduce inflammation, which is one of the key drivers of so many age-related diseases. Chronic diseases, cancers, cognitive decline, and so on. Yeah. And of course, there's a lot of things to improve. From energy, brain health, etc. So there's small things we can do in life right now that we can improve a lot of these, very, very essential factors in terms of health span. But again, it's important to know what really works for you and what doesn't. And biology is truly essential here to truly understand. Now, about the upcoming stuff. So, we see imminent technologies that are already here. I mean, that's already happening. The industry is already changing. So we're starting to go into the area of personalized precision medicine, stem cell therapies. I mean, I just recently had a meniscus tear from sports injury. Normally, they would cut off the meniscus, clean that up, stitch it back together. And, I would have osteoarthritis in 15, 20 years. So I said, no, we stitched it back together. We squirted about 20 million stem cells from placenta in there, and it regenerated completely within a couple of months. But there's more. So gene therapies, gene editing, organ replacement therapies, and so on. So all of that is happening, whether in the lab or in clinical trials, or sometimes already experimentally in the field. Near-term future, again, this is something that is just decade or two away from us. So we already are doing continuous glucose monitors and things like that. So very soon we'll be having intra-body nanosensors. We'll be able to control kind of Yamanaka reprogramming, or however we want to call that stuff. We're starting to get into an area of truly a whole body regeneration and rejuvenation. There's bionics already happening. I mean, heart, the first artificial heart was decades ago, right? And then when we truly want to talk about science fiction, that I believe truly will become science fact, not so far in the future, is we're talking about intra-body bio-nano machines, enhanced human evolution, and possibly even longevity escape velocity. Whether that's 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, who knows, right? But when I think about it, we are 100 years away from discovering penicillin. We're 70 years away from discovering the first vaccine. Yeah, we're 20 years away from actually decoding the genome, and 10 years away from CRISPR. And it took 7 years from the first 3D printing machine that printed metals to a 3D printing of cells and organs. So it was from 2012, the first 3D printing of metals, and I think 2019, we were already printing cells and organs. So the growth of technology is so exponential, right? That things that are now already in experimental stage in the lab, I mean, I'm just truly amazed what's coming in the next decade, 2 or 3. So I would not predict when and where, but this stuff is definitely coming. So the message of this talk is, you have one vehicle in this life. That's the only one that matters. And the better you maintain it, the longer it will serve you well. But the key thing is, with this longevity revolution happening and around the corner, this may be more important and more relevant than ever before. Yeah, and so we can do a lot to keep on fine-tuning, engineering the left Mercedes. And when you neglect these vehicles so much, there's unfortunately not that much we can do about the guys on the right side. So thank you so much. Stay tuned. A lot will be coming very, very soon.
Thanks, Enej. I've got a bunch of questions, but before I get to that, I wanted to put something on the screen and tell you about a meeting we have coming up next week, actually. Many of you might have registered already. This is the Longevity Science Singapore Conference on September 7th from 9 to 5. Unfortunately, we're out of seats at the actual event, but you can register and view the show, the whole webinar or series, the whole conference on Zoom, and the registration details are listed at the bottom of the slide. So we look forward to seeing all of you virtually. We'll have a lot of great local panelists talking about age-related issues in Singapore, and wonderful international speakers who are, many of which have already done webinars for the show, so you can get some updates. And so I look forward to that next week. I wanted to just follow Enej on what you were talking about, and we mentioned this a little bit before the show too, which is that when you come to these conferences like Copenhagen and hopefully ours next week as well, what you realize is that a lot of worlds are colliding together now in this longevity revolution. You used to have basic biologists talking to themselves and geriatricians talking to themselves, and there wasn't really anybody in the longevity private sector at the time. And now we have big data people, we have clinicians here, we have scientists here, we have drug developers and longevity clinics and app developers, and it's an exciting time. I'm not sure what's going to happen when these worlds collide and where we're going to be. I think it's going to be, I'm as optimistic as you are. I think there's great things in the future, but how we get there is going to be interesting fun, I think. So, you've been witnessing this too. What do you think about how the landscape is changing in longevity research?
Yeah, no, great question. And, like we discussed earlier, I mean, coincidentally, I started my career doing, PhD research on rapamycin, but we were exploring it back then as a drug to treat cancer. But I do remember that even as a student, I was blown away by the amount of genome and the whole biology that is dedicated to these repair mechanisms. And yet, when I was walking around the conferences and asking, so why don't we try to kind of keep these repair mechanisms going for longer, I was always ridiculed by big pharma guys from Glaxo, from Pfizer on panels, like, oh no, we can develop drugs for Alzheimer or Parkinson. But aging is not a disease; it's just something that happens. And so it really is absolutely invigorating to see how the field has changed over the last 20, 30 years or so. Because not only this, like you say, I mean, the science has made huge breakthroughs, but the industry is coming in, like you said, from many angles. However, what I think is really, the key to me that I know something is really happening is that the public perception is changing. Everybody is now aware of, that biological age is not chronological age. Everybody is now aware what we mean when we say health span. It's not lifespan. Yeah, we don't want to live decades on tubes and feeling sick and unwell and so on. Yeah. So there are already governments out there that are starting to say they want to focus on improving their nation's health spans. And so there's no longer, that much talk about, the lifespan per se, but really about keeping people healthier. So the fact that we're now bringing science, industry, governments, as well as public awareness to recognize that this is something we can do, and nobody's talking about that we want to do immortalities or whatever, and who knows whether that's ever going to happen. Probably yes, in a few hundred years, but the fact that we are doing something to really stay younger for significantly longer for the first time in human evolution, that's to me absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I agree with you. It's really probably, you could argue, one of the biggest medical revolutions in history. And yet, as you mentioned, life expectancy is going down in the U.S. How do you resolve these contradictions? I mean, I have my opinions, but I'll start with you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so there's a few things. So one is there's still not enough public awareness of that staying healthy is actually cheap and easy. And so, people think that that's only for movie stars who are doing kind of, stem cells and Botox and whatever. But in reality, just staying off that burger and that, donut and not eating that much Coke is the first, and not smoking, of course, is the first step. People feel much better, when they are less inflamed and less obese and so on. Yeah. But the imminent dopamine hits that you get from all of these things, we need to still kind of keep on working on that for sure. So it is frustrating when you see that, the diets and the lifestyle, and the stress and everything else around that is still going so much down. There's more I can say. I've spent a lot of time in Cambridge, Massachusetts, when we were working on Comet Therapeutics, and I experienced firsthand. So here in Europe, you go out and, you have your nice salad with an organic salmon or something like that. It costs maybe 30% more than your regular spaghetti. It's a bit more expensive. You go to a supermarket, you buy, bio organic and so on. It's a bit. In US, the divide is so huge. Like if you want to buy healthy, really is expensive. So again, I don't have full answers for that because, eating that hamburger is crazy cheap. But I do think that where we can't solve all the problems, where Longevize is trying to go is to bring these, by using AI, by using machine learning, by using this systemic approach and so on, we try to bring this knowledge and this ability to optimize to, affordable levels for everyone. Again, I don't want to really namesay, but, some very, very prominent influencers announced recently, they're making this kind of private health clinics, et cetera, that are doing longevity. I mean, when I check them out, you get a consultation there for $20,000 for the first time, and then, $15,000 subscription thereafter per year. That's not affordable for most people, right? So again, the first step is bringing this knowledge and the power of starting to optimize to an affordable level to everyone. Then there's a whole range of things that would take too much of our time to discuss. But
well, first of all, I just want to point out that I am drinking a Coke, but it's 0 sugar, so hopefully.
Yes.
But yeah, I agree with you. And I think that it underlies another problem in the U.S., and that's politics. I think there's been an underemphasis on education, and I'm always telling people that longevity should be a life course problem, and the best thing we can do for people that are growing up is to educate them in sustainable, healthy lifestyles, and that means they have to have resources to learn. They have to not be so stressed that they can't sleep. And I think that we tend to forget about these things, and particularly in the U.S. with the K-12 education system being so variable, depending on how wealthy a region is. Mostly, we're paying the price for a lack of foresight, lack of progressive thought, and lack of education. And I think that politics needs to come around to this and understand.
And of course, it's also the materialism, right? So it's amazing how even the low-income families, they will do everything to have that nice, beautiful, shiny car or have new sneakers all every month, etc. So that's why I really like this analogy with vehicles, right? Because in my opinion, there's only one vehicle that really matters, and once you have that vehicle in shape, typically it tends to get a happy vehicle, right? The materialism of all those cars and things like that, you're stressed, you're frustrated, and so on, and you're fat. So really we need to change priorities where what really matters. I think that's also,
and I think it's also about opportunities for low-income people. The gaps are so big in the U.S. now that people at lower income states have a hard time living, and they're like, "Why do I want to live to 90? I'm not even happy now." And I think that these things. Anyway, we're getting off topic. I could go on about this forever. You're talking about apps. And a lot of people are thinking about apps for healthy longevity. The challenge, I think, for many people is to develop something that people not only adopt, but do it sustainably. So it's not something they do for 3 weeks or 6 weeks, but it's something that becomes a part of their life. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I agree completely. However, that's also, an area where I feel very, let's say, sensitive or concerned about, right? Because what you do want to make sure is that you're not trying to sell people something that is just a joke, right? So I'm seeing apps that are calculating your age scores based on some questionnaires, and then they're saying, okay, have you drank 3 glasses of water? Oh, you've now improved your score for such and such. I mean, yes, it's important to hydrate, but don't. So I really have a problem with a lot of these apps, right? So a lot of the stuff is really made up to sell certain type of excitement. Yes, they're often like useful tips, but they don't go properly into science. Yeah, they don't really understand, who you are, what's your biology, what's your muscle structure, what's your, genetic fundamentals, what's your microbiome in there doing, and so on. What's your, even BMI and inflammation and so on. So what we're trying to do is, with this app that we are working on, is to really kind of connect all these dots together and try to summarize that into really kind of the most important health drive. And you're right, people need some kind of gamified engagement. They need to bring things back, right? But it is important to give them something that is truly founded in science and that keeps on tracking data. So we're all about data. If it doesn't work, even if the scientific papers on mice show that might be a really great thing for you, maybe there is something in your microbiome or something else that happened to you in the past and you have an immune response to whatever, it doesn't work for you. So you have to track data to really understand that these things work, right? So,
I've come to the opinion on this that, whatever you do for people for longevity has to also help them now.
Yeah,
they have to feel better now. And, like the lifestyle interventions will generate that. If you're exercising, you have more energy, you feel better. Supplements may do the same. I don't know, but I think that's something we have to focus on. We can't just say, oh, do something in 20 years from now, you won't be sick. I don't think that's
spot on. Yeah. But I can tell you, even from experience, once people get on these kind of programs, and we've run, a small pilot on that as well, we're seeing, huge improvements of, energy, stamina, body composition, inflammation goes down, all these kind of things. We're seeing reversal of menopausal systems. And again, I'm not saying that that's entirely caused just by supplementation, because if you're a couch potato and stuffing yourself full of, well, again, that's a topic maybe we can discuss, because I do think that if you're a couch potato, metformin may be a good thing. But if you're an athlete, maybe metformin is not the thing for you. So again, it's really complex story, right?
It is complex, and we've heard some of the supplements we work with a return of hot flashes and menopausal symptoms as well. So I think that may be a real thing, although I haven't seen any sort of clinical data on that.
I worked in my, let's say, previous drug discovery life. I worked quite a lot on the Krebs cycle, and I know you guys are working on the ketoglutarate, and there's really a lot of what we can learn about, kind of the whole mechanism as the kind of mitochondria starts dying out and the energy cycles start dying out. The cells start being hungry for energy, and they start eating up. It's a compensatory mechanism that kicks in. So you're starting to degrade your glutamate, you're having glutaminolysis, and thereby basically you're degrading your muscle. That's why we see sarcopenia, right? And clearly that's why this kind of from succinate to ketoglutarate and so on, these kind of molecules are aiding the system, right?
So I want to go to questions, but just for one more question for you first, and maybe we'll do this in a minute or two. Everybody talks about personalization. I talk about personalization. I think it's right. We need to personalize. How far are we on that, though? How much can we personalize right now based on longevity pathways and hallmarks? How much research still needs to be done? Where are we on that scale?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question, and I think we're actually very far. I think we are very far along the way. So again, you need to look at, let's say, several different layers of what the personalization means. So when you look at the big, GWAS studies and randomized clinical control studies and so on, there's not so much that we can really, fully know. However, there are examples like, for example, there are studies that show that in general population, supplementing with vitamin E, it doesn't really help, much anyway in terms of cancer prevention. But then you segment it down to, the genetic level, and if you look at, for instance, the COMT genotype, then you can see that, certain types of people are actually having a preventive effect of vitamin E, and certain types of people having actually deleterious effect, and they're getting more cancer. So that's just a simple example of looking at these big randomized controlled trials. There are a few, and we're learning more and more, and they're amazing. And very soon you can start seeing the mechanistic effects behind it. Then you get into the optimize yourself, right? So again, there's a lot of things we know quite significantly, like, you take MTHFR, the methylation pathway. There's a whole bunch of genes on this pathway that lead to, production of hormones, regulation of sleep, regulation of DNA and RNA synthesis and repairs and so on. And so many of those genes may either be, less efficient or broken and so on. So And there are clear data to show that certain of those enzymes can be significantly improved by certain types of supplementation, the B vitamins and the zincs and so on and so forth. So again, there we're not talking longevity, but we're talking about prevention of this type of decline that is clearly linked to, let's say, an HFR, which is about 20% of population. And so, when then we go to longevity, the story becomes slightly more complex, because of course then we start talking about the mTOR pathway or the NADs or PGC1 alpha or all these kind of things. But there, then we get to the story of the small talk that was given before this presentation on rapamycins, right, and calorie restrictions in mice. So if, like I said before, if you're a couch potato and if you eat a lot of donuts and so on, your cell is in continuous growth mode. It doesn't stop. mTOR is activated, IGF-1 is activated, and so on. So all of these things are in an overdrive, right? So of course, stopping that system, stopping, let's say, activating AMPK, stopping mTOR, or even inhibiting the complex 1 of the mitochondrial chain, that can help. Now, if you're a healthy person, lean body mass, athlete, sporty, and so on, you need certain type of, you need a lot of energy, but you also need cellular stress, because that activates muscle regeneration, tissue building, all these kind of things. So for those, if you start suffocating the pathways, it's most likely going to lead into deleterious effects, right? And so even when you talk about NAD supplementation, all these kind of things, it's not a one answer. So I do believe that here there's genes, but there's also your physiology and your lifestyle. So, and there's a lot of data to start showing that. Even just one small example, which is just on the lifestyle. Again, we talk good genes, bad genes, etc. Like, BDNF. I really like that one, because the science was so beautiful. Like, there's quite a strong difference in terms of BDNF expression by two types of SNPs. And that's the factor that keeps our brain plastic, that keeps our, cognitive function going. And it's associated with less Alzheimer and so on. Just measuring that in cerebral spinal fluid, you can see that, a lower efficacy gene will have less protein expressed, but significantly more impact is your lifestyle. So you see people with high activity gene, but being couch potatoes, having hardly any BDNF in their cerebral spinal fluid. And then people with low activity gene, but, doing high intensity interval training, cycling, this and that, they will have significantly higher levels of BDNF. So again, you can really influence these really important longevity factors. So knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's great. We better get on to the questions from the audience, because we could talk all day. Sharmila, can you tell us what the audience is thinking?
Thank you, Professor. Hello, Dr. Kuscer. Thank you for the insightful talk. There's quite a lot of questions coming in. Firstly, they're asking, do you have any data demonstrating superior health outcomes of your personalized recommendations versus general health recommendations?
Yeah, that's a good question. So indeed, this is something that we aim to do in the future, to do proper kind of randomized control studies. So taking, general nutrition advice, or, the current fad in dieting, etc., versus, something that really goes personalized. Also the supplements, like, the most common off-the-shelf longevity full stack supplements versus personalized. What we've seen so far in a smaller pilot study, where we did have controls that just tested and then retested and did no lifestyle change, we saw significant changes and improvements. But again, what I'm saying is, this whole field still has a lot to do and a lot to learn. So really, what we can start doing is, based on the best that the science can teach us, that gets fed into the knowledge base, but then it's really important to start tracking trends, tracking feedback, reanalyzing, retesting, and then starting to see really what works and what doesn't. Because again, what we discussed, we know a lot, we don't know yet. We don't know everything yet.
Thank you. They're also questioning, why isn't metformin is not for the athletes and only for the diabetes?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and so I mean, this is a topic we could discuss actually for probably for an hour. But what's really important is to know this distinction between the cell cycles. So the cell growth cycle, the cell repair cycle, kind of rest cycle, and so on. Yeah, and you know, the athletes, they are in this continuous kind of let's say repair and growth and repair mode, where, you know, the stress factors are kicking in, all kinds of cell signaling mechanisms are starting and so on. So they're giving the cell a lot of time to check for mechanisms that might not work properly, right? Whereas people who, this is why, for example, also you take away the athletes, you just do a simple experiment of fasting, right? You stop for a while and you go into fast, and so many activities are kicked in, right? So many activities in terms of, autophagy and let's say even cell regeneration in a way are starting to happen. Yeah. So the way that the cell growth and the cell repair mechanisms are controlled are largely directed from its identification through fed or fasted state, right? And so, again, sport significantly impacts the need and the demand on, the energy load. It keeps on switching between the glycolytic and anaerobic phases and the oxidative phosphorylation phases and so on. So these are all kind of the mechanisms that in athletic people are continuously engaged. And if the cell doesn't perform, it continuously repairs. Whereas in a typical, let's say, couch potato person, you will typically not be in anaerobic and glycolytic stage until you catch cancer, because cancer really does like anaerobic glycolysis. But you will be more in kind of the oxidative phosphorylation continuously with IGF-1 continuously expressed, etc. So again, I probably, if I want to go down to mechanisms, it would take far too much to explain, but there's a lot of science to suggest, to show actually already with examples that if you are a healthy athlete, metformin not necessarily will be a good strategy for you.
Do you consider environmental factor as a significant contributor to the level of longevity?
Yes, for sure, significantly. And there's a lot to discuss what the environmental factors is, right? So one thing is the air that you breathe, the water that you drink, the pollution and so on, the stress of the environment, the stress of your work environment, of your family environment, and so on. Yeah. So all of those things are hugely impacting the way basically your body responds and needs to keep on, being, either under stress or, managing damage and so on and so forth. So yes, environment is hugely important.
Thank you. Also, they're asking, is these different lifestyle changes so that they have a real impact and without being overwhelmed to follow or stay accountable to your health path? What do you all include? What kind of lifestyle do you include?
Sorry, once more. So what kind of lifestyle changes are advisable or? Yeah,
that's what they meant. Like they meant like what kind of lifestyle changes would you recommend to have a real impact without being overwhelmed to follow or stay accountable to your health?
I guess let me rephrase that. How do you prioritize?
That's a very good question. So I can tell you, for example, like when you do this systemic analysis, right? First of all, you need to know, am I obese or do I have a high level of inflammation and so on? Inflammation, let's really very quickly work on that, right? But let's take a healthy person. Let's take a healthy person that wants to start really optimizing. Yeah, you may find out that, in addition to all kinds of things and maybe all kinds of small biohacks, you figure out that you have a very poor microbiome. And then that's an eye-opening thing. Oh, my food menu is just, continuously the same thing. And poor microbiome leads to really poor metabolic flexibility and response and immune system and so on. Yeah? So that becomes your priority. There's a lot of things you can do, but you start focusing on one at a time. I think it's really right what you said, Brian, is that, first of all, you need kind of a continuous engagement. You need a gamified way to see that I've succeeded somewhere, but also you can't do all the lifestyle changes all at once and then forever, right? So you need to start small. You need to start small fine-tuning. And again, that's where with our app, we've built this kind of personalized recommendation engine that really looks at the kind of various risk factors involved, at various kind of biomarkers and aspects of the system, and tries to kind of push and prioritize what seems to be most hurtful or most useful for your biology at the moment, but also try to understand what are your priorities, because you come into this journey with a certain priority as well. Am I lacking energy and stamina? Am I, do I want to, lose weight, or, whatever? Am I, so all kinds of things that are driving people. So kind of you try to find the right match that will keep people motivated, but also that it's testable, that you can actually see the results of your progress, right? Because again, that pushes you to that next level of fine-tuning and optimization.
Maybe time for
and again, it really is personalized. So even if you say, okay, do more sport, right? For some people, especially as we age, our muscles are built in a different way. And again, there was a slide on fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers. And so our muscles are built in a different way by genetics. And so for some people, kind of longer cardio, cycling, marathons, and so on may be fantastic. This long, slow duration of stress, etc., may be very, very supportive of their biology, because that ranges from the hunter-gatherer times when somebody had to, go for, hunting that gazelle for many days. Well, for others, they're built to fight the lion and defend the tribe. They're the explosive types. They need strength training, resistance, and so on. And so when you look at the biology, if you put the strength guy, Usain Bolt, on a marathon, the stress that his cells will accumulate through that process will likely cause irreparable long-term damage. And this is why you see so many runners and cyclists with serious heart problems later in their years. They can train themselves to be fast, but they really damage, and others do not. And so it really matters that the kind of the exercise recommendation you're making does fit your biology profile.
One more question, Jamila, probably.
Yes. So what makes Longevize unique from all other biotech companies out there trying to develop new therapies to extend lifespan? In the other words,
like Brian said, I mean, we're all on the same mission. We're all on the same mission. What we believe and what we're working towards is this really systemic approach that is data-driven. First, data-driven to understand you, and then data-driven in terms of how you start your optimization. So really continuous monitoring, continuous awareness. So really having full insight rather than, trying to do, just, one aspect of yourself and maybe hope that the rest will follow. We really try to kind of systemically bring that together. And like Brian said, try to really optimize, what are the most important priorities to start fine-tuning, seeing the results, seeing the data, and keep on kind of optimizing that, keep on improving. And we really try to bring that in a holistic kind of way. Yeah. But again, we're all in the same boat. We're all kind of driven by the same mission. Make people live better, healthier, and longer.
Thank you.
I think that's a good place. We unfortunately have to stop, but thanks for the seminar, and we'll hope to have you back in the near future, Enej. I want to remind people to use the chat function in the panelists and all attendees options to leave comments. Look for news for our center and the School of Medicine in the end credits. We have a Twitter feed now that you can go to, and that's also available in the credits. And as you know, we've launched our new Center for Healthy Longevity website. And as I mentioned previously, we have our upcoming seminar next week. And not only do we have talks available all day on the 7th on Zoom, but you can go to the Center for Healthy Longevity on the Alexandra Hospital campus on the 8th for an open house to hear more about what we're doing on the clinical side of longevity research. I want to remind people also that next week we will not have a webinar because we're busy with the conference. So we will come back on September 15th, and we will have Luigi Fontana, who is the Director of Healthy Longevity Research at the University of Sydney, and he'll be talking about diet and longevity. I'm sure I don't have a title, but I'm going to go out on a limb and venture that's what the discussion is going to be about, and I'll be there to talk to him. I want to leave you with a final video with Singapore's Minister of Law and Minister of Home Affairs, who's 63 years old.
Guys, that's my 10-minute workout. It's a 22.2 CrossFit because I didn't complete it for my age group.
I'm feeling like sunshine, like springtime, like something's in the water and I'm taking a deep dive. I'm feeling so weightless, like I'm gonna make it, and nothing in the universe can take this. I can see it clearly now, nothing gonna bring me down.